Hello, all. It's time to start. You know, I get my stuff all set up, get my Gatorade going, and I sit here and I double check, and I realize, it's not 1 o'clock yet, but hey, there's people here already, so why not get the show on the road, as my dad used to say. So I see some of the usual suspects in the room. Dixie Champagne, hi y'all. Daniel Kester. Summer ends on the 21st. Yeah, right around there. So I saw today is the 20th. And since the live streams are once a week, I tend to look for things that are happening right around there, give or take a few days. So there you go. Jared Draper, good morning. And what part of the world are you in that it is still morning? Acoustic Theory, Michigan summer is wonderful but short. That's one way of putting it. We had a heat wave pretty much the entire month of August. By that, I mean we had almost no rain. And then all of a sudden, after Labor Day, it kind of turned the corner and became cool out. And so like right now at almost 1 o'clock Eastern time, it is 63 degrees F, sunny skies outside right now. It's absolutely gorgeous, but a little on the chilly side, which what you think of in the fall, in winter. So, we can still get some days, 80s, 90s. We can still get some days where it might snow. That's Michigan for you. Kevin in New York says hello, as does Jared Draper. Morning. And Najkin or Niken, hi from Sweden. Thank you for checking in. Don't have as many Swedes in the audience as I do have Finns, but I'm glad to hear anybody checking in from anywhere. Donald Fletchinger, how you doing, Steve? Or how's it going, Steve-O? Thank you. I'm doing quite well. I appreciate that. Sean Jensen, hi from Utah, 2 weeks in a row now. Wow. You got a streak going. By the way, I've got a Peloton, and this morning I did my 48th week in a row. So since I got it 48 weeks ago, I've not missed a week. I've missed a few days. There were entire months I went without missing a day, but in the summertime, I don't Peloton as much if I can ride outside. Duncan Campbell checking in from Melbourne, Australia. Thank you very much. I love hearing from the people down under. And Jeopardy 4100, good morning from Anchorage. So we're talking about the other side of North America. I'm not quite on the East Coast, but I'm in the Eastern time zone. So I like to think of myself as being in the East. Michael Bullington, 72F in Lubbock. That's not bad. Teresa Haddad, Gettysburg, took my boat out yesterday. Out of the water, or you took it out on the water? See, that's an ambiguous statement right there. Brian Ekdahl says it's light rain in Lacey, Washington. And the plebiscite, hi, Steve, hope you and yours are well. Evening here in the UK. Yeah, I always like to think of my friends in England and add 5 hours. And so I've known people in England. I know a few there right now. In fact, I've had clients from England in the London area. And so I always think, it's 2 o'clock here, it's 7 o'clock there, 1 o'clock here, it's 6 o'clock there, give or take. I know that the daylight savings time can throw that off from time to time. Davey Mack, hi, Steve, from Vancouver, BC. Sarah Callahan, good afternoon, same time as the Lions. The Lions played last week and apparently looked really, really good until they didn't. And I've been a Lions hater my entire life, and there's a reason for it. I'm convinced that the Detroit Lions would do better if they had different owners. I think the owners don't care. And so as long as people show up and watch the games, they don't care. They don't care. So the Lions have done horribly forever. I mean, if you go back to the 50s, they did well. But, my lifetime, they've done horribly. And every single team should have a once-in-a-lifetime moment. The Detroit Tigers won the World Series in 68. They won it again in 84. They did pretty well in the 80s, 90s a little bit. But the Detroit Red Wings, who were really, really bad at one point in time, then had a really, really good spell in the 90s. The Detroit Pistons obviously had a couple good years. Detroit Lions, no, never. The Detroit Lions, a good year is a year where they think that they could possibly make the playoffs. And when they make it, they lose. So if they're playing today, heaven help you if you think that's more entertaining than what I'm doing here. But then again, you might like watching somebody lose. So I guess that's okay. Wild Bill 57 says, you can't hate a team that's so pathetic. I don't hate the players. And I don't hate the team. It's the ownership. I'm convinced it's management. And think about this. You got a whole squad of players who play football. There's a bunch of coaches, and then there's the head coach, right? And the head coach is the one who lives or dies by the win-loss record. And the head coach, of course, has a lot to do with who they draft and who they sign and who they play. But the head coach answers to somebody in management who answers to the owners. And the Detroit Lions have been owned by the same family all these years, and they've been horrific the entire time. They need somebody to come in who actually cares and is willing to spend what it takes to turn them into a winner. So, don't know. Michael Bullington, what about Bobby Lane? That's going back quite a ways, isn't it? Oh, boy. Paul Lemke, the Lions curse. I don't know if it's a curse. I mean, we always have heard about things like, the curse of the Cubs or whatever. But the Lions, it ain't a curse. It's just bad management. I mean, it doesn't take a curse to lose if you're managed that badly. Michael Bullington, do you hate the Ford family? Well, hate's a strong word. I just don't think they should be owning the Lions anymore, so. One red rubber ball says, not a sports fan here, don't care. I'm a bigger curiosity about red rubber ball. Is it a reference to the song by The Circle written by Paul Simon or not? Red rubber ball. Acoustic theory, is it the Tigers that are owned by the Ford family? No, Tigers are not. The Ilitch family owns some other sports teams in town, and they show you how it's done. When they got a hold of the Red Wings, they turned them into a winner. And I believe, don't they still own the Tigers, the Ilitches? So Herbert Rushlow says, Lions fans are diehard. We always hoping for the year. No, that's true. And on some level, I respect that. But the problem I have is I like to look at it economically. And the only way you can probably get the Lions management to change would be to stop showing up for the games. And if they had totally empty stands when they were allowed to have people in the stands, then I think they would change. So Wild Bill 57 says, Steve, I agree. Horrible ownership. Patriots had the Sullivans before their success. Awful ownership. Yeah, and sometimes owners come along, shake things up, inject some money, and start winning. Mike Levy says, Steve, the Ilitch family does indeed own the Tigers. Yeah, because there was a time when Monahan owned the Tigers very, very briefly. And Monahan's the guy who owns Little Caesar, Domino's, and the Ilitch family owns Little Caesars. And that's one of those really crazy things that these two dominant pizza places are both from the Detroit area. So pizza, Achilles' last stand. Brian Ekdahl, what brand of gas are you using in the Viper? I always stick with a name brand gas, and I always put premium in it. I'm required to put premium in it by the owner's manual, which tells me I ought to. But I have not stuck with any particular, like if I see a mobile station, I'll use mobile or any other major brand. One of the things that you learn from working at a gas station is that there is stuff that gets into the tanks. So you want to get to a higher volume station that has a lot of turnover, that moves a lot of gas through their pumps. And so I tended to stick with the big brand names at along busy roads and use the premium from them. But I'm trying to remember the last time I put gas in it. It was probably a couple weeks ago. I did take it out last night, drove it good 15, 20 miles out, turned around and came back. So hadn't been out in about a week or so. And, it's good to get it out and stretch its legs from time to time. And Mike Levy points out that the Mets are going to have an owner that will be willing to inject some cash and make them better shortly. Because I've been following a little bit. I read a bunch of different newspapers on the internet every morning when I get up. And a couple of them are near New York. And I know the Mets have been for sale for a little while, and there's a lot of debate as to who's going to buy them and how much money will they have and how much will they have left after they buy them. Bob Bongs has started by skipping me. What the F? What did I do to you? You jumped in at a spot in the feed where it scrolled past, and that happens. So unfortunately, we've got 169 people in the room, and so Joel Kirschman says, you've mentioned always keeping gas receipts. Have you sued any gas stations for bad gas? Yes, I have, but not on my own behalf, but on behalf of clients. I've had clients who got bad gas, had the receipts, could prove it. We filed lawsuits. That happens. It doesn't happen as much anymore, but it happens from time to time. One Red Rubber Ball says yes on the song by Circle. Red Rubber Ball. There you go. And that song was written by Paul Simon. So if you look it up, I'm pretty sure you can find a version by him and also versions by other people. But the Circle had a big hit with it right around, I'm guessing, 65 or 66-ish without looking it up. So Jim Adams, what's the compression ratio on a V10 Viper? That I don't know off the top of my head. I know all the important stats, like it's 488 cubic inches, it's 8 liters, it's an aluminum block, and so on. I don't know the compression ratio off the top of my head. I did buy the owner's manual. I have the owner's manual, but I bought the garage manual, the shop manual for it. It's like this thick, and I've got that on a shelf in my living room. I pull it out from time to time and just flip through it to see how complex the various repairs are. So Brian Ekdahl says the 9.5 to 1. And Acoustic Theory says it's usually something around 10. So 9.5 to 1 would be about that. And Acoustic Theory says that's about as high as you can reliably do on pump gas. So, and Tommy Barrio says, yeah, the gas is not bad. It's the tanks and how they're handled. And that's true. And so, and many people don't ever stop to think about this, but at a gas station, they've got pumps, right? And you go up to a pump and you pump your gas. Well, those pumps take their gas out of big underground holding tanks. And so the tanks are filled up by those tankers you see drive by, and the tanker goes over and takes a hose down and clamps the hose in place and then offloads, thousands of gallons of gasoline into an underground holding tank. And so the way you measure how full those tanks are is you stick the tank. You literally take a big stick. It's like a pole vault stick, but longer and skinnier. And you go over and you pop the lid off and you lower the stick into the tank and you pull it up and see how where the wet mark is. And I used to stick the tanks all the time at the gas stations I worked at. But the problem is that as you're taking the lid off and on, and of course there's a parking lot there and there's stuff happening above it. And if the guy comes in and is, putting water in or putting gasoline in when it's raining, water will get in there. Now, water and gas don't mix very well. So the odds of that getting in there are pretty slim. And then, of course, as the gasoline leaves that tank to go up to the pump, it gets filtered. So most stuff will get taken out of there. But I've had situations before where people came into a gas station to buy gas and a whole bunch of them got tanks full of water. It's possible. Highly unlikely, but it's possible. And it's probably not even just an accident at that point. It's someone either screwing with somebody or it's pure, unadulterated negligence. So Chevy Mustang says, whenever I buy a car, I always buy the Haynes manual. I've got the Haynes manual for my Explorer, the 02. So that's cool, too, because that shows you all the basic repairs, wiring schematics, and so on, and what stuff's supposed to look like when you pop the hood or put it up on a hoist. And, you can go out and climb underneath your truck and take a look at it with your own eyeballs, or you can open up the Haynes manual and look at a photo first so you know what to look for once you get under there. So, Felix F says Mazda runs 12 to 1 on pump. Okay. Joel Kirschman says, speaking of repairs, I'm currently working on adjusting the valves on my Honda, and I have to take half the engine apart to do it. This is routine maintenance that is needed around 100,000 miles and every 100,000 thereafter. That sounds like a nightmare for the average person. It's also the kind of thing that most people wouldn't do. So I suspect if you bought that car with 150 on it, it probably did not have the valves adjusted. That's the kind of thing it's good to know if you're out car shopping for a particular car to discover, because if a car is running poorly, there might be an easy fix, or it might not be. Peter Mandix is a gas station in Boulder recently had diesel accidentally pumped into the regular tank, messed up a bunch of cars. Oh, that'll do it. That's one of the things you discover if you accidentally grab the diesel pump handle at the gas station, is it's got a big old filler tube on it, so it won't fit. So, it's diesel, and you put it back. And the problem, of course, is that if you were to put the diesel in there, it would screw the engine up. But of course, if the diesel got put into the wrong underground tank, that's a different story altogether. And yeah, these are all mistakes that can be made. You just hope they don't. So Hey, McOscillator's checking in from Glasgow, Scotland. Checking in. Hi, Steve. Thanks for checking in, my friend. Glad to see you. Herbert Rushlaw, water is heavier than gas. So I'm assuming in the tank that the water would sink to the bottom. Daniel Kester, I worked at an AM PM store, which is Arco's version of 7-Eleven. It would have that issue when it rained. Yeah, no, I've seen guys, dumping, tanks full of gasoline from their tankers in the rain. They can't stop just because it's raining, But I mean, how much water is going to get in, and the filter is going to take it out, so it's not that big of a deal. Acoustic theory: if the fuel tanks at a gas station start leaking, it's about time for that station to close down. But some keep going for a little while using soil vapor extraction to try to suck out the leakage. Yeah, and I also know that a lot of gas stations that were built, I'm guessing in the 50s, maybe even the 60s, had really bad underground tanks, and nobody cared back then because people didn't care so much about groundwater and they didn't care so much about the environment. And so there are a lot of gas stations that went out of business. And when they tried to recycle the property into something else, a new owner would come in and they would do some basic, environmental assessments and come to the conclusion that there's a problem. We actually have got to clean up this stuff. And I know that, for instance, in Michigan, we had an underground storage tank fund that was put together by the government to help people get underground storage tanks out. Now, that was also for home heating fuel, home heating oil, where people have an underground storage tank in their backyard and they stopped using it and they just covered it up. And the government wanted those things removed if they could. And some people just say, hey, look, can't afford to, I'm going to leave it there. And I can tell you right now that there was a time when I was home shopping, looking at homes, and I was looking at a home that was built a while back, and out in the backyard were some vent tubes coming up out of the ground. And I knew what they were, and the person I was shopping with knew what they were, and it was an open house. And so I walked by the realtor at the open house, and I go, hey, what's with those vent tubes in the background? And the guy goes, don't know, but don't worry about it. And I go, well, aren't those for an underground storage tank? They goes, oh, no, of course not. What do you mean, of course not? That's what they were. Paul Lemke, I remember my dad had his tanks pulled in the 80s. Sean Jensen, gas station I worked at, pulled out underground tanks in the late 80s, put in above ground tanks. Above ground, really? Wow. Daniel Kester, California had all gas stations replace their underground gas storage systems about 10 years ago. And I can tell you, I remember I was in Los Angeles for 2 years for law school, late 89 to early 91. And that was around the time they were introducing the new pumps that have got that weird sleeve over the tube. And so you have to take that thing and very, very carefully inject it into your car so that accordion collapses but doesn't push the thing out. And I remember dealing with that. And they were talking about how much of the fumes from people just pulling that thing in and out of their tank and the fumes of while it's being pumped was crazy. But of course, if you do that across the entire landscape, it'll make a difference. But I remember that. Jim Adams, octane is for anti-knock and high compression engines only. Claims it will give you more power is sales puffery. I suppose you could look at it that way, but I think what they're going to say is, but if you don't use it when you ought to, you'll get less power. So it'll give you more power when you need it. But yeah, the average car will not accomplish anything by running premium gas. Now, I know some companies claim that they put different cleaners and stuff in there, whatever, but Bob Loblaws is not allowed to bury oil tanks anymore. You mean like underground storage tanks for like fuel oil and stuff? Yeah, I can see that makes sense. Yeah, the problem, of course, is that when you bury the tank, if it starts to leak, it's very, very difficult to tell. And I know guys who worked at gas stations, and they said that they would stick the tanks, and they could calculate how much the fuel was going down, and if they measured it as it came out of the pumps, they were losing gas somewhere. And there aren't many places to lose it between the tank and the pump. So it was leaking out. So, but they don't tell people that. So JP points out that he was in Gillette, Wyoming right now, but he was at Mount Rushmore yesterday, and he was rocking the Late Till His Law t-shirt at Mount Rushmore. And JP sent me the photographs to prove that, although he didn't point it out, I just saw it. But he sent me a picture, said, hey, Steve, here I am in front of Mount Rushmore, and he's wearing the Leto's Law t-shirt. I appreciate that for checking in like that. So thank you. Brian Ekdahl says, read up on Shell Gas 92 octane. It might change your mind. It has some good stuff in it. GM recommends it for their vet CTSV. Yeah, but will it give the car more power? In other words, if you have a car that's perfectly tuned for 87 octane or 89 octane, and you put 92 in it, will you actually get more power? That was the specific question. Chevy Mustang points out that Detroit is up 7-zip against Green Bay. And of course, that's what we call fool's gold. JP just gave me permission to show the picture. Question is, can I find it now that I've pointed it out? I should be able to figure this out. Hang on. Let's see. Search for JP. Oh, come on. There we go. Search for JP. There we go. And then give me a second here. Dude, you post a lot of pictures. And they're not in order. Hang on. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Well, hang on. Unfortunately, the caption is going across it. But right there, you can see the Leto's. Oh, there you go. The Leto's Law logo and Mount Rushmore in the background. Got to look way in the back. That's JP at Mount Rushmore wearing Leto's Law shirt. So there you go. You can get, you too can be featured on Leto's Law live stream if you go someplace and photograph yourself in a t-shirt. So, Doug Jones, where's Johnny Knoxville lately? I don't know. He checks in from time to time, but he also disappears from time to time. So I know that he has, a very busy schedule. And he works very, very hard. Before I forget, by the way, I've got to tell you that there's a unicycle on my set, and it's hard to see sometimes depending on what's behind it. But that's a die-cast unicycle, and I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I as a child could ride a unicycle. Have not ridden a unicycle in years, but I did at one point in time. So a gentleman sent me the unicycle, and he says, Steve, wanted to add a unicycle to your collection of transportation stuff and let you know that there's a whole group of us out here in Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valley Unicycle Group, or svuni.org, svuni.org. And they say you can learn, you can practice, or you can ride with us. They do distance riding, mountain unicycling, trials, street, freestyle, flatland, basketball, race, hockey, commute, workout, or just exercise unicycle. So that's the card. That's the unicycle right there. And I appreciate it. It'll be there for a while. Someone else asked a question. McOscillator, Steve, quick question. During your radio days, did you monitor off air or off desk? You mean off the actual console? I would go off the program feed. Program feed would go to the transmitter, and then we would have something to indicate to us that we were still on the air. In fact, many of the stations I worked at had other parts of the building that had the radio being brought in. It depends. There's always a problem because if I was doing talk radio, I often had a delay. So obviously I couldn't go off the air for that. And even with music stations, although there is not that much of a delay, there can often be a tiny little bit of a delay, but you're going to get a much, much better sound off your monitors, meaning monitoring the actual what's going on in the program to the transmitter. So I don't think I ever worked at a station where we actually monitored or listened like with our headphones to what was going out on the air. And, not sure there's a big reason for that, but there you go. Daniel Kester now claims that his fish are watching me. Now, we can't count fish among the the audience, but I appreciate that. The tricky part is like dogs or cats. It's hard to get fish to do something in unison. I understand they act in unison if they're in a school or something, but we can't tell them what to do. Fish are difficult to train. So if they're watching, I welcome them in my audience. Chevy Mustang says, I've seen videos of unicycles going down mountain trails. Oh, you can find crazy stuff on the internet. Yeah. Go to YouTube, look for, crazy unicycle stuff. There's even stuff about guys doing mountain bike rides in places that would freak me out. I wouldn't want to stand there, let alone ride a bike. So Acoustic Theory says those fish are well entertained, but the question is, can they hear? What can they hear in their aquarium? Brian Ekdahl says we use VP Racing Gas 110, but for 5 gallons, it's $89 plus tax. Hey, I got to tell you something right now. A very good friend of mine contacted me the other day and said, hey, Steve, did you see this new Dodge Challenger drag pack? And I said, no, what's that? And he said, apparently Chrysler, FCA, or whatever they call themselves these days, wants to homologate a car for racing in NHRA. So to do that, to make it legal for NHRA as a stock car, they got to sell 50 to the public. So they apparently took this Challenger and put a supercharger in it that puts out like 1,600 horsepower, a roll cage in it, but it's got no airbags. It's got nothing in it that you don't need. And it's not street legal. It doesn't have a VIN. It's literally just a part number. And it'll set you back a little over 6 figures, but it'll do a 7.5 second quarter mile, 7.5 quarter mile. And the roll cage is even rated by NHRA to do that. And so apparently they announced we're going to sell 50 of these, and they sold out just like that. Friend of mine got one. He hasn't got it yet, but he's going to get one down the road. So I'm hoping to shoot a video of that. I shot a video of another guy's Copo Camaro, which is a similar idea from General Motors a few years earlier, out at the Troy traffic jam. And that thing was a blast to see and also to listen to it run, because like the Dodge drag pack Challenger, the Copo Camaro simply has, a race engine and then pipes and no exhaust, no mufflers, no catalytic converters, no nothing, just pipes to get that heat out of the engine compartment. And that's it. They sound really, really good. So we'll see how that goes. Dixie Champagne says her cat is watching. Cat gives show a meow. Appreciate that. Thomas LeMay, last time I did the Tahoe Century ride, that's 100 miles in a day on a bicycle, I saw 5 unicyclists out there doing the same ride. Yeah, and that's difficult. That's difficult because you can't coast on a unicycle, you coast on a bicycle. And so because of that, you just got to keep going. And then eventually, if you want to give your legs a break, step down. So Tiger Stripe says, I think fish hear with their whole body. Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the way sound waves travel through water. But my question is, if you had, like, say, a 50-gallon aquarium and a speaker over here that's broadcasting my show, what's it sound like by the time it hits the water? Donald Whittemore says you can pick up 100 octane at a pump at an Arco gas station near Las Vegas, but it's expensive. It's high roller gas. Bob Bong, Steve Leto, sunny Hartford, Michigan, 53F. Hartford, Michigan, is that over on the west side? Not far from, like, say, Berrien Springs or Eau Claire, that kind of town. Dowagiac. Dave Beto is looking forward to the show you will do on someone caught driving one of those on a public road. That's the question I asked, and we don't know the answer to that because these cars aren't street legal. Okay, it'll do a 7.5 second quarter mile, but it's also not designed to be driven around slowly. It's designed to fire up, launch. It has a parachute, deploy the parachute, shut the engine off, and then maybe come back and do it again. But it's doing all these runs at, it probably idles for a minute or two, but then it launches for 7.5, and then you shut it off. So I doubt you could drive it very far. But obviously, you couldn't drive it legally on the roads, although I guess you could travel with it, right? Georgiana Thornton, hello from San Antonio, Texas. Hello, Georgiana, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Daniel Kester points out, if you really want to get 115, go to your local General Aircraft Airport, and that'll cost you. And Bill points out that the 100 octane that you can buy at the airports, might be low lead as opposed to no lead. And that could be a problem, theoretically, putting that in your vehicle. Ray Lepp says, my bicycle will fall to the left or the right, but a unicycle adds 2 extra falling directions. That's true. And if you want to get technical about it, a bicycle falls left or right, but a unicycle actually has the full 360. And so it's even worse than that, but it's kind of funny. I've mentioned before that when I was growing up, I my older brother had it, but he let me ride it. And I got good enough where I'd ride it to the store and, get a bag of groceries and ride it home, Neighbors probably thought I was a freak, but, you're not using your hands for anything else, right? It's not like you're on a bicycle trying to steer with one hand and hold groceries with the other. So, Lemsia, Mr. Leto, has a client ever sued their attorney for ineffective counsel? It's an interesting question. And I saw it earlier, and I'm sorry, but it's trying to control, it's like trying to juggle cats, which isn't as bad as you think it is. But the ideas and comments that come up here are often from such different directions that I'll go off on one, I'll forget about another. But we've all heard of ineffective counsel. So you are put on trial for something and you lose because your attorney screwed up bad. And you go to jail. Now, you can get the conviction overturned based on ineffective counsel in theory. But the question is, could you then sue the person? And I suspect you could. I suspect you could sue them for malpractice. And that's really what it boils down to. There is a civil cause of action in most states for malpractice, legal malpractice. And I know an attorney in Michigan who specializes in it. And the cases I'm familiar with that he's talked to me about were people who filed a lawsuit and their attorney screwed it up so bad that they lost a lawsuit they should have won. And then they sue there saying, hey, look, if you'd done this right, you wouldn't have lost me this money. So that's why a lot of attorneys carry malpractice insurance. I'm not sure if I've ever heard of somebody being sued for malpractice in a criminal setting, but I suppose it could be done. I've just never heard of it before. So, Tommy Barrios, herding cats. It is, yeah. Well, herding cats is something else to joke about as well. Juggling cats, of course, is what they joke about in The Jerk with Steve Martin, when he has all kinds of people hitting him up trying to get him to be generous with his money. Somebody shows him video of people juggling cats and say they need to raise money to stop this horrific practice. Song Yardbird, hey, dude, from Elyria, Ohio. Thank you for checking in. Blah, blah, blah. Where's Lionel Hutz? Did you start playing with him? Lionel Hutz is right over here. He'll be back in the set. I did a TV interview. I can't talk about it just yet, but I will shortly. I did a television interview where the producers of a television station contacted me, or a television program, a nationwide program, contacted me and said, hey, Steve, we have a legal question. We're wondering if you can answer it. And I'm like, yes. So I answered the question with the producer on the phone, and the producer said, hey, do you want to be on television? And I'm like, again, yes. She goes, we need to schedule a film crew to come up there and film you. Would that work for you? And I said, film crew? I got a whole setup. I said, you didn't find me on YouTube? And she goes, no, I found your articles on Jalopnik. And I said, oh. I said, I've got a whole YouTube channel. While we were talking, she pulls it up and she goes, oh my gosh. She goes, you've got a studio? I go, yeah. She goes, can we interview you in your studio to answer the question on our program? I said, absolutely. So a couple of days later, I did a hookup with some people, I believe in Atlanta, who were producing this television show. And before that happened, though, I took a quick look at the set. And I thought, okay, if this is going on a nationally televised program, and most people will have no idea who I am, I've got to make a couple minor changes. And so I removed or moved around a couple of the license plates, because right now I look like an egomaniac. Leto, personalized plate, Leto. But so I removed a couple of the license plates. And then the Lionel Hutz action figure, I almost said doll, the Lionel Hutz action figure was so prominent when I removed this license plate that I removed it as well. And so I played to the background a little bit. And I put most of the stuff back. And I just realized now that the Lionel Hutz figure did not make it back onto the set. I left the $100 bill in the shot, though. So it's there. It's there. So, but I asked him, I said, do you guys want, do you care about the bumper stickers? And then it's, no, that's fine. That's fine. Leave it. So that's what's going on there. So I will let you know if and or when that TV show airs and what that's all about somewhere down the road. JJ CEO says your show needs more cowbell. Well, I've got 2 cowbells back there. And Sean Jensen reminds us that it was the Optigrab that Navin Johnson invented with the guy who came in to the service station. And then the Optigrab made them both filthy rich. And then, of course, there's a class action lawsuit because that handle was right here and made everybody get cross-eyed. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there, but it's a great, great movie. But yeah, so that was the cat juggling. So oh, JP says technical question. No luck. I'll explain that later. Dixie Champagne, did you get your invitation to the Deer Dash 5K? LOL. Yes, I did. And Dixie was kind enough to send me a postcard to my P.O. box regarding a 3-mile race in Atlanta, which is kind of short. I run the marathon every year. I often run a 10-mile race in Flint called the Crim. But generally speaking, I don't run many organized races shorter than that. So we'll see about that. Alan Bryant, greetings from Morrow, Georgia. I saw an article this morning about a business in Bad Axe. Really? I'll have to take a look that up. Bad Axe is a fairly smallish town up in the thumb of Michigan. I worked there for a couple of years and years ago. And it's, of course, just well known because it's got that great name. Felix F. now says, per Google, the Viper is either 9.6 to 1 or 10.2 to 1. Okay. Mine's a 1999, if that makes a difference. They did play with the engines slightly from year to year, but not, I don't know what they changed each year. So, Lemzia, where was the $100 bill for the Dukes of Hazzard video? I'd have to go back and look. It's always there and somebody always spots it. And I can tell you right now that not too long ago, I put it on top of the 8-track of the creamed Israeli gears there. Extremely difficult to spot. 2 or 3 people immediately, boom, on top of the 8-track. On top of it, and it's like they've got radar for it. So, Canadian Robot Lady says, Steve, we want to know how much penny candy and what type you bought with the found $20 you talked about in a recent video. I probably bought Zots. Remember Zots? I was actually at a candy store a couple weekends ago, and I was walking by the counter, and I took a photograph, but I never did anything with it, of Zots. Don't even remember those or not, but they were hard candy, but you bit them and they fizzed in your mouth. And according to this, they were available in blue, raspberry, orange, or grape. But it was just ZOTZ. That was a very, very popular candy back in the day. So ZKR99 says, man, I always forget what time these are. 1 o'clock on Sundays. One of the reasons that I specifically do 1 o'clock on Sundays, it's not because I want to compete with the Lions. It's not because I want to compete with the Indy 500. It's because I simply wanted to pick a time and just stick with it. And I've had some people say, Steve, we can't do that. Do it like 3 o'clock. The problem is if I move it around too much, it's going to become one of those situations where, no one will remember. So Harold Rowe 2 asks, is a city attorney allowed to be a private attorney at the same time? It depends on what state you're in, what city they're in, what their contract says, probably what the municipality's constitution is, whatever they have. They have some, formational document. And then also on what type of cases they're handling. So I can picture a small town where they have a city attorney and it's a part-time job and he can still practice law so long as he never takes any cases against the city or any cases where he's got a conflict. But for instance, if he's handling a real estate transaction in another city, he could probably do that just fine. But a city attorney might also be subject to a specific contract between himself and the city, and they might have it in their contract. In exchange for this, you will not do the following while you're under this contract. I don't know if what the likelihood of them doing that or not, but the bigger question you almost always have to have is when an attorney is doing something, you want to look at it and say, is there a conflict? And the conflicts will arise if there's a special relationship between the attorney and one of the other parties or somebody else who's involved in the suit. That's what you got to look at. So, Tiger Stripes. I've heard of Pop Rocks. Never heard of Zots. No. Pop Rocks are different. I know about Pop Rocks also. But Zots was a hard candy. It was molded about the size of a butterscotch or something, but it was a little bit more oval. And then when you bit into it, the inside fizzed. Pop Rocks were shaped differently, called differently. We also had Pop Rocks. And I think, I could be wrong, and again, somebody can look this up, I think Zots came from France. I don't know why I think that. Oh. Micro Manley, do you know of any state where you cannot get a duplicate title for a lost title? Not that I'm aware of. I know most states, if you lose a title and you can go in and prove that you were the last titled owner of the car, and you sign an affidavit or something to that effect saying, I lost the title, they'll give you a duplicate title. And the duplicate title will often say, this is a duplicate title, suggesting that if the old title turns up, it becomes better than the one you got in your hands, but they'll give you the duplicate title. I've gotten those before. In fact, I think I even did a video on how to get a title once you've lost your original, because it can become a bit of a mess. Lemzia, Zots were awesome. And Jeff points out they sell Zots on Amazon. And Joel Kirschman says Zots are from Italy. I knew they were from someplace over there. I was close. JP, of course, gets us all the language. Zots is a candy with a fizzy, sour center manufactured by G.B. Ambrosoli in Italy and distributed in the United States by Andre Prost Inc. Oh, boy. Christopher Ritchie, are private attorneys allowed to prosecute? Generally speaking, prosecutions are brought by the people, but it depends, I suppose, on what the local people hire. Most jurisdictions have a prosecutor who's an elected person. I know there are some jurisdictions where a private attorney can, in essence, do a prosecution. And I don't even want to get anywhere near that right now because it's been so long since I looked at it. But there was the tragedy at the football game, soccer in England at Hillsborough, where, it was like 70 or 80 people got trampled to death. And there was a huge cover up. It was a gigantic mess. And I'm fascinated by the whole story. And I've seen several documentaries on it. I've read books on it. And one of the things about it was that the local prosecutors refused to prosecute for the longest time. And so under British law at that time, an individual could do the equivalent of a prosecution. And it's a very, very old, almost like archaic concept. And so they pursued it that way. But it's just weird. But for the most part, prosecutors are going to be people who've been appointed or elected to a position. But many of them, if it's a part-time job, for instance, might be a private attorney who's told, oh, by the way, one day a week, you're our prosecutor. I know some small towns in southeastern Michigan have a city attorney, and a couple of days a week, the city attorney goes and sits at the courthouse. And he's a prosecutor for that city. So, Charles Domilewski, what about a writ of mandamus if a state prosecutor refuses to act? There's a whole can of worms there. Generally speaking, if a prosecutor refuses to act, what you do is you make a bunch of noise about it and see if you can't get someone higher up to act, like a state attorney general. Because in theory, like the Oakland County prosecutor and so on. But if it's a state crime, well, then the Attorney General of the state of Michigan could step in and do something theoretically if it's a state crime. Also, grand juries can sometimes do stuff, but someone's going to call the grand jury. But there's always that problem where someone commits a crime and people think they know who committed the crime. And that generally is a pretty low standard that you need to have to get someone indicted. Reasonable belief that there's a crime been committed and a reasonable belief that this person did it. And so whatever the standard might be in your jurisdiction. But the point is that if the prosecutor won't do it, what happens? And that is a problem. So Chevy Mustang says now it's Detroit 7, Green Bay 3. And don't worry, that lead will evaporate. 2000 MCR, Bazooka Gum. Bazooka Gum. What a crazy concept. Not sure why they called it Bazooka Gum. It was the worst of the hard gums. Remember when Bubble Yum came out? Bubble Yum was like a seismic shift in the world of gums. But Bazooka Gum, it was like hard. It didn't taste that good. And pretty much the only reason you got it was because it came with a little comic, Bazooka Joe. And the comic wasn't that good either. And sometimes it would just have like really stupid jokes or a little 3-panel joke. And, the one guy wakes up and goes, hey, I had this crazy dream that I ate a giant marshmallow last night. I woke up this morning, my pillow was gone. There you go. It's a Bazooka Joe joke. I still remember it. Ronald Knight checks in. Hey, Steve from San Antonio says hi. Thank you very much. 90 Knots says Lions will always find new ways to lose. Hey, this is a family show, 90 Knots. You should know that. Hubba Bubba, Mark Sparks. Yeah, that there was a time frame when Bubble Yum came out, and then there's a whole bunch of these other gums that came out capitalizing on these soft gum craze. And of course, that all changed a few years ago. Now it's all the breath gums. You one small piece this big, and it makes your head smell like spearmint for like a month. So, Fred Stewart, the worst gum came in sports cards. You got that right. And that's the funny part. If you think about marketing, there were some baseball cards or football cards back in the day. And then there'd be a piece of gum in there. And I seem to recall the gum was never even wrapped individually. It was just that the paper around the cards was somehow like waxy or plasticized or something. And so you'd open it up and there'd be cards in there. And then there'd be a piece of gum, which you have to chew immediately because it wasn't wrapped. It was no good. Oh, boy. Not sure Hubba Bubba grape is the best. It's good stuff, my friends. Amateur shooter double bubble. Yeah, it's good stuff again. Whoa! Sarah Callahan claims the Lions have scored again. Why must you turn my program into a house of lies? Don't worry. They'll still lose. Lemsy, I remember the sports card gum would break in your mouth. Yeah, that's the problem when you bite into the gum and you hear it crack. You hope those aren't your teeth. Oh my gosh. Charles Domilewski says the Garbage Pail Kids. Yeah, there were those. And what were the other ones? The ones with the advertisements. Oh boy. Drawing a mental blank on it. Paul Lemke, Big League Chew. I'm convinced the tobacco companies put that stuff in the market as a market a loss leader, just to hook kids in the idea of chewing something while they play baseball. Jim Adams wasn't the baseball card gum made by the 1910 Fruit Gum Company, or is that a song? Well, no, that's a band. It's a band. They did the song Yummy, Yummy, Yummy. Laffy Taffy, blast from the past. Did you play arcade games in the 80s like Pac-Man? Lisa Credian. No, I played Defender. Missile Command, a little bit of Joust. Never got into Pac-Man, nor the Pac-Man fever. But I know people who played Pac-Man and memorized all the patterns, so they could just sit there and play it mindlessly for hours on end. Whereas Defender, I could play mindlessly for hours on end, also off one quarter. But at least I was shooting stuff while I was doing it. So one of these days, I might get myself a Defender, upright Defender. Might put it right there in the corner. Leave the sound turned on so you can hear stuff exploding from time to time. Peter, Defender was the best. I'm telling you right now, I know where to buy a Defender upright machine. I've looked at it. I've sat there and gone, how long will I own it before I go, that was a stupid thing to buy. Oh, Peter played it in the 300 Bowl in Elma, Michigan, another little town up towards the middle there of the state of Michigan. Me Minor says Space Invaders was a good upright video game. Space Invaders was one of the first. It's one of the first of that generation. I remember Space Invaders being in a school lunchroom in a college in 1981 or 82. I'm thinking 81. And of course, the thing about it was that you had to learn how to shoot the Space Invaders, but leave one on the end so they'd come down at you slower. Every little game had a trick. And once you learned the trick, then if you got good at it, Defender, of course, was the one. And Missile Command was another one. And there are several of them. But Mickey Rats in Ann Arbor, where whenever I went to Ann Arbor, we had to do two things. You had to play video games with Mickey Rats, and you had to go eat hamburgers at Blimpie Burger. And by the way, I have a Blimpie Burger t-shirt my friend Tom got me. And I wore it on camera about a month ago. And one of the jokes with Blimpie Burger on their logo, it says cheaper than food. And somebody actually say, what's that mean? It's a joke. Charles Domaluskis says, did you find the glitch that made the birds stop shooting in Defender? The birds? No, the glitch in Defender was if you got it up to a certain point, which was basically 999,999 points, and you rolled it over, when the odometer, in essence, of the scoreboard rolled over, it would blast you into hyperspace. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, And then what would happen is you'd get a whole ton of extra lives and a whole ton of stuff. And so you could then blast your way out of hyperspace and wind up in a position where you could play forever. But you had to get there first. That was the hard part. Randy Kendrick, Centipede was fun. Centipede's another one. That you could get so good at, you could play for so long that they updated it to Millipede, and Millipede is like very, very difficult to get as good at. But Centipede is good. If you said, Steve, you got to have two, Defender, and I think I'd go with Centipede as the second one. I love Centipede as well. So now someone just pointed out that could be a tax write-off. Herbert Rushlow, it's a tax write-off. That's an interesting question. Could I write the Defender off? Because number one, I could claim I'm a Defender, therefore it's some kind of advertising. If I had it on camera, I could claim it as a prop, right? Asteroids, Beaker, that's it. Asteroids. I see a mental blank. Asteroids is another one. You get good at it, and what you would do is you clear the screen of everything except one little last piece of rock, and then you sit there and zoom up and bring you back down the bottom, and you sit there and zoom back and you shoot the little guys that came out for 1,000 points apiece. I know far too much about 80s video games. Oh, Donkey Kong, Daniel Kester. I never got into Donkey Kong. I remember seeing guys play it, and it's like Mario. I came out a little bit too late for me, so I wasn't really that into it. So Bob Bong says, Steve Leto, everyone else saw it, but for you, I had a major stroke. I'm staying with my son for now. I'm sorry to hear that. Hang in there. A brother of mine had a stroke a couple years ago. And I can tell you that obviously your situation might be entirely different than his, but from the moment that he was at his lowest point, you would have guessed that things were really, really bad. And by working very, very hard, having a very, very good attitude, and having people around him help him, he actually managed to recover quite well. So hang in there, and we will all be thinking about you. I'm sorry to hear that, but like I said, hang in there and do what you can. Yeah, it's not me. 07 says that's where Mario came from, Donkey Kong. Yeah, I mean, if you watch Donkey Kong, it's basically Mario, but just running up a very simple maze compared to what the later versions of Mario became. Hold on. JD Mather, would you host a 4-hour podcast with Biden and Trump? Do I get to talk or just let them talk? Why am I there? Or would I be moderating? I so hate to even talk politics, but I just saw the question. I'm like, what? JD Mather. Thanks for the thought-provoking question. I'm not sure. So, Jeopardy 4100, the Viper is a prop. Write it off. I've had several people tell me that. I got to talk to my accountant. I don't think that's how it works. Johnny Yuma, have you always been able to talk so fast? Yes, it's unfortunate. I wish I could slow down a little bit. And sometimes I do. And I can tell myself to slow down. But I can tell you why. And it's because I have 5 older brothers. I've mentioned it before. 5 older brothers. Yes, there were 6 boys in one family, and this is me. So I'm the youngest of 6. As you can imagine, there were times around the dinner table, me, 5 brothers, my dad, my mom. It was impossible for me to get a word in edgewise because I was the youngest. Therefore, no one's listening to me in the first place. So I had to talk fast if I wanted to get heard. So I remember going to school, talking this fast. People go, dude, slow down. You don't need to talk that fast. It helped me on the radio. But I've had a court reporter tell me to slow down more than once. So it's not me. 07 says, only way to be heard in a large family, talk loud and fast. Number 6 of 7 here. See, there you know. Paul Lemke, my mom is 5 of 10. That's much more common back in the old days. You often hear about that for people back in the old days had 12, 14, 18 siblings. I'm about 18, but I've heard of 12 more than once. JP says you can deduct 57.5 cents per mile if you use the Viper to make videos that provide income. No, I understand that. Problem, of course, that's not covering my gas. I'm just kidding. I don't drive it that much. So the mileage itself wouldn't be that big of a deal. Charles Domilewski, lawyer by day, auctioneer by night. That's pretty good. The question I have is, I've watched auctions take place in England, and I've watched auctions take place in America. And now, I'm not talking about the high-end, like Sotheby's auctions in America, not so much, but the other auctions, okay? Barrett Jackson or Meekum. The auctioneers do that thing where they're a million miles an hour. They don't do that in England. Why do we do it in America? What's the point? Is the thinking that if the guy's talking 100 miles an hour, like I gotta bid quick? Because anybody who knows, I mean, it must be that they're thinking that somehow is a psychological thing to get you to jump. Raise your hand. Otherwise, I don't know why they do it. So, Jack Summers, number 4 of 6 here. Fred Stewart says, I'm 5 of 5. Am I a Borg? What was I didn't watch the later generations of Star Trek, but there was the woman whose name was a number of something. I seem to recall she was a looker. You know what I mean? JP says that the U.S. and Canadian auctioneers intentionally talk fast to confuse buyers. Well, they can't admit that they're trying to confuse anybody because you want people to theoretically get involved who know what they're doing. Ken Cretin, square dance callers. That's another art form altogether. Yeah, Jack Summers, Star Trek, 7 of 9. 7 of 9. Does anybody? There we go. Calic, that would be 7 of 9, or Jerry Ryan. Yes, Jerry Ryan. Thank you very much. Like I said, I didn't watch the show, but I seem to recall seeing pictures of her at the time. Tiger Stripes has a question, but I think we know the answer. Oh, boy. Tiger Man 99515 says, a good friend of mine is one of 13. His mom was pregnant every year during the 1950s. Wow. Well, Bill agrees that 709 was indeed a looker. Jeopardy 4100 says Dutch auctions are in reverse. First bid wins as the price drops. I know they often do Dutch auctions. They've got a bunch of things to sell. You know, like I've got 20 of something to sell. And if I do an auction for the first one, no one's going to want to bid because they're like, well, I'm going to wait till the 20th one goes up for sale. So they have to do it kind of backwards. They call it a Dutch auction. Tommy Barrios says 7 of 9 was part Borg. Yes, but which part? Alan Bryant, my dad is the youngest of 10. Steve, back then they had more kids so they can work on the farm. That's probably true, especially in the farming communities. You know, and we often forget about how things like that really, really affected our culture. So that, you know, it's one of the reasons the school year falls where it is. Because kids needed to be around from spring till fall for the farming issues. And then, of course, in the winter, they can go to school and they don't need to be back until the spring. So a lot of other stuff happened that way too. Duncan Campbell is 7 of 9. Or is Duncan Campbell calling out that she was 7 of 9? That was her name. Sorry, Duncan. For a second, I thought you were telling me the 7th child of 9. That's what happens when we talk about numbers in two different contexts. Dave Beddoes, not everyone could afford a TV in the 1950s. And Ram 50 V8 just got notified that we were live. Greetings from Arkansas. Thank you for checking in. Mark Sparks suggests Jerry Ryan's figure was accomplished with foam. So you're telling me that before silicone they used foam? Or are you saying that her outfit was enhanced by like people on the people who created the props? So yeah, and JP says that when I moved from Canada to South Carolina, I noticed the school years weren't the same for a reason. The harvest is earlier in South Carolina. There you go. There you go. Paul Lemke, my granddad, was in a family of 12. He was rented out with the tractor. Jim Adams, so the farmer had girls. Would that be a big problem? No, at that point, you just star in jokes about the farmer's daughter or daughters. Tigerman 99515 says, not true. She was a Miss America entrant. No, I think what we're talking about is the outfits she wore may have been like very, very tailored to her. So Lee Harvey, my grandfather had 17 siblings in England. Wow. Ken Cretan, law question. How often do lawyers or whoever attempt to go against precedent? That's a very good question. And this is the kind of question I think I may have talked about this in a video, but the problem is when I do videos like this, nobody cares. They get no viewers. It's hard to come up with a catchy title. I need to come up with some kind of clickbaity title. But generally speaking, okay, if I look at a law and I want to understand the law really well, I look at the law and I go read a bunch of cases that have interpreted it, okay? And if I discover that the cases are interpreting the law this way, and I think it ought to be interpreted this way, I have the right, if I have a client who wants to do this, to file a lawsuit and try to get that interpretation overturned. This is the easiest way to explain it. So I can file the lawsuit and say, boom, 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 I lay the law and I want this kind of a ruling. Now my opponent's going to come in and go, I got 75 years of precedent that says that's the law. You're misinterpreting the law. And here's the thing. An attorney can ethically tell the court, I'm not here because I'm saying that's not the law. I'm saying that is the law, and that law needs to be changed. And so you have the right to ask for what they call the reversal or modification of a law contrary to the way it is currently accepted as being. But technically, to be honest with the court, you have to tell them that. And I have a beef with this because I've been in court before and I've seen a judge ask somebody, what does the law say? And they go, it says this. The other attorney goes, nope, it says this. The judge looks at him and goes, you can't both be right. One of you is wrong. And the problem is, one of them is not wrong. One of them is lying. They're actually being unethical. And so in my mind, that's a major problem. So I have much more respect for an attorney who goes into court and says, Your Honor, case law goes this way. I think it should go this way. And the judge might say, too bad, I got to follow case law. Take it up on appeal. You go up on appeal, you say the exact same thing to the Court of Appeals, and you keep going up until eventually you're hoping to get a high enough court to say, you know something? We agree with you. And this has been done wrong all these years for whatever reason. So it's doable. It doesn't happen often. But those are the kind of cases that often get to the U.S. Supreme Court because all the lower courts have all ruled this way for a long, long time. And somebody out there says, you know something? It really ought to go this way. And until the Supreme Court says that, there you go. So it happens more often at those kinds of cases, but it happens from time to time also. Chevy Mustang says Detroit 14, Green Bay 10, referring to the Lions football game. And like I said, it's still early. And by early, I mean the final gun hasn't gone off. Up until that moment in time, just consider the game a loss to the Lions. Always. Carmel Olafson. Hi, Steve. Can car manufacturers turn the clock back and produce cars from the 1970s today without making them to modern standards? The big car companies could not. Smaller boutique car companies could to some extent. And by that, I mean that there are different rules that apply to automobile manufacturers in America that are large volume and then very, very limited volume. So, for instance, large volume companies like Ford, GM, Chrysler, Honda, Toyota, Nissan, whatever, they make over a certain number of cars. You got to have things like airbags and crash standards and catalytic converters and emission standards, all that stuff. That all applies to them. They've got to do all that stuff. However, if you make a small enough number of cars, you're allowed to build the cars without some of those things. So if Chrysler decided to start building 1969 Dodge Chargers again, they'd have to update them. Airbags, crash standards, all that stuff. If some small company got the rights to do it and started building 1969 Dodge Chargers, they could probably build a small number of them, like maybe, fiberglass bodies or something. And I think the only thing to worry about there would be like emissions, but I think they can get away with a lot of the other stuff without doing it. That's why there's so many companies that they're making like Cobra replicas. They big car companies couldn't do it, but small car companies can. So, Matthew Showstrom, Steve, what happens legally if a bouncer takes a legitimate ID card and refuses to return it? This is a great question because we've all seen situations like that, or we've heard of situations like that. You're going into a bar, you hand your ID, the guy looks at it and goes, this is fake, and just keeps it. Okay? Well, here's the thing. If anybody steals anything from you, call the cops. Now, small town, cops will show up. Big town, they might not show up. But the point is that's theft. Just because he had the right to look at it doesn't mean he has the right to keep it. That's what I would do. Of course, I'm a lawyer. I'll sue over anything. No, I'm just joking. But Johnny Yuma, what do you like most about practicing law? I actually like the fact that I can answer questions for people and sometimes help people. So, people call me up with questions and I answer the questions. I like being able to do that. The sad part is I actually get more phone calls from people I can't help. And I get a lot of phone calls from people who buy used cars as is. And there ain't much I can do. Ken Creighton jokingly, have you heard my pleas that the RE20 sounds horrible? There are 3 or 4 things that I'll never believe anybody on, and one of them is this microphone sounds horrible. And yet about once a month or so, I'll have somebody go, your videos sound horrible. You got to get rid of that stupid microphone. So I don't know. People complain about everything, it seems. Tommy Barrios says there's a guy out in Arizona remanufacturing the 55, 56, and 57 Chevys. Doesn't surprise me. Harry Hodge, what's the best thing you did for a client? It depends. Are you talking about that made me feel good, made the client feel good? So I'll tell you right now, I've had a lot of clients who are so sick of their cars. When I got their cars bought back by the manufacturers, they thought I was like Santa Claus to them. I mean, it was. They're like, I never thought I'd have a solution to this, but I've had a lot of other situations where I got very, very good results very, very quickly. Once in a while, I just get lucky, but I can't. Nothing really comes to mind. Matthew Shosman says, Steve, but what about gas stations chopping up credit cards? That's different. That's different because I suspect if you look at the credit card, it says it belongs to the company, not you. I worked at a gas station, Tillard's Mobile, back in 1979, 1980. And when someone came with a bad credit card, back then we had to call it in. If I called the credit card in and it was no good, the operator would actually say, the card is declined. If you can keep the card, we'll pay you $25. And to a kid making $3 an hour, that card went into the safe so fast that it would hurt you if you got between the safe and my hand putting that card in there. And I got to go out and tell the customer, I'm really sorry your card is declined. I've been ordered to keep it. And when I was working at the gas station, I had one of the guys I was working with get that, I was talking to the operator, and she goes, if you hang on to the card, $25. He walked out and gave it back to the customer. And I go, what did she tell you? And he goes, if I kept the card, I get $25. I go, why do you keep the card? And he goes, well, it's not my card, it's his card. No, it's not. So I actually claimed that bounty twice. And Mobile would actually send a $25 check to the gas station. And the gas station was kind enough to just give us the cash. Go, there you go. Good job. Because they like doing that. So, apparently you guys are still discussing Jerry Ryan and her suit, which gets back to my statement that she was a looker. So there you go. It's not me 07 says, yep, got many of those take the card bonuses when I worked at an airport parking lot in Boston in the 1980s. Was it $25? That number rings a bell. I remember it was enough to where I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm so happy to grab the card. Amateur shooter, do you remember the bad card books? Those I think were slightly before my time because when I pumped gas, you would actually take the credit card inside, put it on an imprinter, put the thing on top of it with a bunch of, carbon, a piece of almost like cardboard, carbon paper, and then the lighter copy. And you go thunk thunk, and you had to set the numbers. You'd roll the numbers, and you thunk thunk, and then you'd put it on a thing and take it out, and they would sign it, and you tear off the top and give it to them, and the bottom half you kept. But we were required to actually take any charge for $25 or more, maybe $20. But back then, gas was, at one point it was below $1 a gallon when it started out, and any charge $20 or more, you were required to call. And when I started, you'd actually dial the number, 800 number, and an operator would answer. And you say, hi, I'm calling from a mobile station with a credit card check. I'd read in the number, tell them the amount, and they'd say yes or no. And they would give you a number that actually say the authorization code is, and you had to write the authorization code in the corner. And if you let somebody buy more than $20 worth of gas and you didn't get the authorization code, the owner of the station's wife would actually sit you down and tell you and go, by the way, just let you know, if this thing comes back as bad, it's coming out of your pay. And you learned very quickly not to do that. Now, I don't remember anybody ever actually having one get through, but you learned very quickly, no. Because if it's above that and you got the code, the station didn't get hit for it. But if you didn't get the code, the station get hit for it. So JP says it's called a credit card slip. I know, but I'm trying to describe it for people who've never seen one. It's actually a 3-part thing with a tear off on the side. And the top was paper, the middle was carbon, and the bottom was a heavier duty piece of almost cardboard, but thick paper. And they'd sign it, you'd give them the top half, you tear the edge off, and you take the bottom half and stick it in your drawer inside the cash register. So ZKR99 says, my folks are both attorneys, and I've learned almost as much practical information through the random stories here. Also, the hilarious stuff is way better than most of what I heard. The question is, if your parents are both attorneys, do they talk business around the house? And do they practice the same kind of law? I'd be curious. Matthew Showstrom, what if a gas station worker cut up what they thought was a fake ID? Well, no, see, that's the dangerous part about tearing up a fake ID, because you own the ID. It's just that you don't own the credit card. Okay? So if I called mobile and they said, grab that card, will pay $25. I grab the card, throw it in the sink. I sink it in the safe. That's what we call it sinking, because the safe had a thing at the top. You drop it in and you rotate the handle and dropped it in the safe. One way in. And if I dropped or sank someone's card and it turns out the card was good, that's between mobile and them. That's not me. I was acting, I was acting on behalf of mobile, but mobile owns the card. But if somebody showed me a fake ID at the gas station, I just give it back to them. I don't care. I don't need their ID. To get into a bar or to buy alcohol at a convenience store, if you hand that guy a fake ID, he might be tempted to keep it. But the problem, of course, is the person can go outside and call the cops and go, yeah, the guy stole my ID. And if the ID is good, you better hope you didn't steal the guy's ID. So that's a dangerous situation. But the question always is, it's a matter of ownership. Who owns the card or who owns the ID? JP says, the place I worked at, it was $50. I had to call in for anything $50 and over. But JP, was that in Canada? $50 Canadian. Burke Upers says, nice to be in the hammock instead of mowing on a Sunday for a change. Super Tiger TV says, when you call the cops, watch out. Sometimes it backfires. Oh, yeah. No, that's here's the thing. If your ID is good. The guy behind the counter doesn't. Okay, he might think it's not good. He might think it is good. You should know if it's good. So if it is good, call the cops. So JP, yes, that was in Canada. Okay. Jim Adams says, you think we had to call in anything greater than $100? Yeah, and this would happen with inflation. But remember, I'm talking about 1980. 1979 was when I started at the station. I worked it through like 80 or 81. So on and off. And I think it was 20 or $25. But, like I said, it was very uncommon. And I remember having people complain because I had to go inside and call and, they're like, what's taking you so long? I'm sorry I had to call, and it was $27. What about encountering counterfeit money? Daniel Kester. I never got handed counterfeit money that I was aware of, but I did see my good friend Paul, who got handed, I forgot what the bill was, a fairly large bill. And this guy I worked with, who was a real hard nose, nice guy, but one of these guys, strict by the book, almost no sense of humor, unless you really got to know him. And a guy handed him, I think it was a bad 50 or a bad 100. And without flinching, he walked into the station, dropped it in the safe, cranked the handle, walked right back out and goes, I'm really sorry, the bill you gave me is no good. I need cash or something else. And the guy goes, what happened to the 100 I just gave you? Or 50 or whatever it was. And my friend Paul goes, it's counterfeit, I'm sorry. The guy goes, I don't get it back. And Paul goes, yeah, come back tomorrow and talk to the manager. Because this was after 5:00 and the management had gone home. And the guy goes, dude, I want my money back. And he goes, I'm sorry, it's in the safe. Nothing I can do about it. And I don't know if the guy came back or not. I think he did. But I remember being at the station the next day because a guy from the Secret Service showed up. I'm talking about an actual guy wearing the suit, ID, he had a briefcase, and was talking to us. And they were concerned because apparently there was a bunch of these bills popping up around town. But, I actually saw a guy from the Secret Service at the gas station over a counterfeit bill. So, corrupt actor. I was a pump jockey in the late 60s, early 70s. I experienced more life than any basement crawler will ever be able to comprehend. No, there's something about getting a job when you're either in high school or right outside of high school where you are helping people and waiting on people and doing something for somebody and interacting with people. And it's both good and bad, but you learn from all of it. And we had some clients who came to the gas station who were the meanest people that you'd ever encounter. You'd see the car pull and you're like, you get them. No, you get them. I mean, it was bad. We had friendly people who came to the station. I got to know people in town. I met a guy named Ralph who owned a store in Birmingham. I became friends with the guy. Years later, hey, Ralph, how you doing? I bumped him at the airport. 20 years later, Ralph, Steve, how you doing? I remember the license plates of some of the people. I remember the license plate numbers because I write it down on the thing every single time they came in. And so simply being useful teaches you something. And I hate to sound like the old guy here, but it's absolutely true. I had delivered newspapers before. And being a newspaper carrier is a lonely profession because you're by yourself at 5 o'clock in the morning, putting newspapers on porches or in the hooks or inside the doors. But you don't encounter people until you go to collect, right? At a gas station, you show up, you punch in, ding, ding. You go walking out, walk up to them, hi, may I help you? What can I do for you? And you listen, you do what they ask you to do. You sell them something, check the oil, check the tires, whatever. And it helps you get in that mindset. And what's funny is I remember even back then, they'd hire somebody who didn't get it. They'd show up for work, they'd punch in, they'd sit down and start reading a magazine. Ding, ding. You look at it and you go, you going to get that? And they're like, well, you're standing. Why do you get it? The only reason you're not standing is you don't understand what's going on here, okay? You're here to work, not read a magazine, So it is an extremely useful learning experience. And I've joked with people and said, I have had several jobs in my life. I've been a lawyer. I've been a law school professor. I've been a tow truck driver. I've pumped gas. I've delivered newspapers. Every job I've ever had, I learned something from. I'm glad I had every single one of them. There's not a single job where I'd go, gee, I wish I'd never done that. No, every job I've ever had, I learned something. So tell your kids, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your country, tell whoever. If you need a job, go out and get a job. And if they say, I don't want to do that, got something better? If not, go do that. Maybe you'll learn something. So Tigerman 99515, gas stations were a bevy of activity in the 60s. They would pump gas, redeem bottles, and sell snacks. Yeah, we didn't have a big snack selection. We had a vending machine. But we did take back returns, but only because we had a pop machine. That sold cans of some off-brand pop that they got a good deal on. Tim Y, the Secret Service doesn't visit these days. They just have you mail them the counterfeit bills. Probably. I wouldn't be surprised. Although, like I said, the guy was concerned about the number of counterfeits that were showing up in that area. So he may have been a field agent and may have just been out in the area and thought, okay, I'll go take a look at this one and talk to somebody. Scuba Stevie 62 said, I taught scuba diving. Doesn't get better than that. Yeah, and that's a scary job. Because if you screw that up, people can die. That's a very, very serious thing to do. Teach scuba diving, not dying. That's serious too, but different. Johnny Yuma, will full service stations ever come back? Probably not. Sad. Bob Lob lost. You may have to explain the ding ding, the sound effects. Ding ding. Gas stations across America would have these little rubber hoses that they'd run out of the building and around the edge of the lot. So that when a car drove onto the lot and ran it over, it would cause a bell to ring inside the gas station. Now, these things are dumb. So ring both as it left and as it came in. But if you went to work at a gas station, you hear ding, ding, you just quickly glance around to see if a card pulled in. And there'd be times around the rush hours where it was ding, 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 and it would drive you crazy, you know? And I can tell you that there was times when I worked, after I worked at gas stations, where I'd be at another gas station, I'd hear it and I'd look around. It's Pavlovian, as we say. Michael Skiba points out that 2 states still don't let you pump gas. And I believe one is New Jersey, as Windjammer Craig points out. And I think Oregon, is it Oregon that does not have self-serve? Or is it partial? So, Tiger Stripes, yeah, Shasta was some terrible soda. Diet Shasta, doubly so. It's like Hydrox cookies compared to Oreos, right? I mean, you know what they're trying to do, but it ain't working. Lemsia, I was a cashier at a casino and would find counterfeits at least 4 to 5 a week. I learned to spot them, and most of them would pass the counterfeit pen test. So the paper was good enough? Isn't that what that's based on? That's interesting, but I can understand that. There's a lot of money laundering happening at casinos, because casinos often handle so much cash that people think that they can offload stuff there, including counterfeit money, which I'm sure they try to mix in with other stuff. Matthew Shosman says, why didn't people just try to buy their gas at 2 different stops to avoid hitting the limit? And the problem is that some of these people weren't sure that it happened, meaning that they didn't pay their last payment, or they paid late a couple times, and they'd never been in trouble before. So they go in hoping they can get gas. I don't know. But there were a couple of times where someone came in with a credit card and goes, just give me $10. And you wonder if that's why they did it, but you have no idea. Daniel Kester, Oregon has no self-serve for passenger cars. Yeah, that's what I thought. Jim Adams, the dinger thing was pneumatic. Yeah, the hose had air in it, and you could actually walk over with your foot and step on it with your heel and get it to ding. But generally speaking, cars driving over it. So, and across the street was another gas station, by the way. So, Chevy Mustang says there's a full service marathon in Coquitlam, Michigan. There's actually a full serve one in Mackinac City. I just discovered, just on the south end of town. Pulled off the freeway over Labor Day weekend, and as I was getting out of my vehicle, a guy walks and goes, "Can I help you?" And I thought he's messing with me, and I go, "Yeah, I'm getting gas." And he goes, "How much you want?" To myself, "What is there a limit? Like what? Huh?" I'm gonna fill it up, and he goes, "Great." I go, "What are you doing?" He goes, "We're full serve." I go, "What? Never heard of that before." And he goes, Yeah. We're still full service. He goes, we never stopped. I had no idea. Guy pumped my gas, washed my windows. I'm like, wow. Gave him the credit card. He even walked over and did the credit card thing in the pump. I mean, so they had the updated modern pumps. They could go self-serve, but they didn't. So, Cyberdoc now admits that he may have been a gas station hose stomper back in the day. I remember as a little kid walking up Adams Road going to the elementary school that was 4 or 5 blocks past the gas station. When I was a little kid, we'd walk over and stomp on the gas hose and run away and thought it was the coolest thing ever. Probably just drove the owners nuts. Like, what's with those little meatheads? Oh, boy. Macintosh for sheriff says, yeah, every kid then loved to stomp on those. Green Rabbit says, I always feel weird the first time I cross the state lines and I was waiting to get gas and waiting until I remember, oh yeah, I got to do it myself. I was 20 the first time I ever pumped my own gas. Well, the funny thing is I remember when the first self-serve gas station came to Birmingham, Michigan, right around the early 1980s. And there was actually a city ordinance against it. And the total station on Woodward wanted to go self-serve. And so they appealed to the city commission to let them do that. And they wound up getting permission to do it. And I remember talking to customers about it. And this is right around the time I started driving a tow truck. So I was still going to be making money. I didn't care. And the station owners were like, no, we're going to stay full serve as long as we can, because they liked employing all the kids, And I remember talking to customers who said, as long as the price isn't crazy, we'll keep coming here because we like the fact these people give jobs to a bunch of high school kids, But it was just a matter of time. But I remember pumping my own gas at the gas station into my own car. But I remember going and pumping my own gas at other gas stations. This is just weird. It's just weird. But, now that's 99% of the world, I guess. So. Mark Sparks points out that Hydrox came out in 1908 and Oreo in 1912. Well, then I guess Oreo's doing it right. Hydrox has just somehow lost their way. Is Hydrox of today the same as the Hydrox of 1908? And now that you point that out, I seem to recall I made that same statement probably about a year ago when I first started doing live streams, or however long ago it was. And I remember having the Hydrox Oreos debate. So Johnny Yuma, Viper versus Tesla in a quarter mile. Who wins? I'm guessing a Tesla. Doesn't the Tesla have some monstrous quarter mile times? What's a Tesla do a quarter mile in? Although the big question is Dodge Challenger drag pack versus a Tesla, because the drag pack Dodge Challenger do a 7.5 second quarter mile. But you don't buy the Viper for the time elapse between point A and point B. You buy it for the feeling you get driving it from point A to point B. JP says the Tesla does a 10.4 at 125. Okay. Duncan Campbell, how does the attendant doing the credit card thing work? He took my card and walked over and stuck it in the reader. And I'm guessing that they had their machines set to where it doesn't require a PIN or something. I don't know, because he did not ask me for one. I don't think. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm trying to remember if he had me do it or not. It's been just long enough ago that I've forgotten about that. Wemsia, it all depends on the gearing of the rear end and trans. I'm just wondering about a stock Tesla, though. A stock Tesla. Unless, of course, they come with a whole bunch of different things. JP says in Oregon, they always ask my zip code just the same as when I got it myself. The problem is that none of my cards work with my zip code for some odd reason. I'm convinced that there's a thing in Michigan where the zip codes aren't correct in the system. Another story altogether. Bob Lob says the Tesla compression ratio is 10,000 to 1. Or 1 to 1. Depends on how you look at it. Depends on what you're compressing. Buff Del Campo, will a Tesla do the quarter mile in self-drive mode? Well, couldn't you just park it at one end and summon it at the other? And just tell it to get there real fast? SD back out. I remember living in Spain and the Canary Islands, my parents pumping their own gas in 1979. Canary Islands. Never been there. Tommy Barrios says racing is about torque. No internal combustion engine can match an electric car. But of course, you understand, I'm sure, about the torque of the turbine car, right? So, I think it had monstrous torque at zero RPM. Retired Butcher Boy, have you ever watched the movie Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood? Yes, I did. I've seen it many times. Great movie. Some people are uncomfortable with the language in it, but I went and saw it at the theaters when it came out. I'd heard good things, and I was pleasantly surprised. And I've seen it several times on cable since then. And parts of it were shot in and around the Detroit area. The barber shop is actually on 11 Mile, east of Woodward in Royal Oak. The hardware store is in, I think, Grosse Pointe, one of the Grosse Points. And it's a very, very good movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So if you have not seen it, if you like Clint Eastwood, you might want to check it out. So I think it's a very, very entertaining movie. And like I said, I enjoyed it, saw it at the theater. So Daniel Herwire says at this time, smart summons is short range and due time should be able to summon cross country. Yeah, I'm joking about that. Of course, a quarter-mile drag strip is a closed course, so it wouldn't be dangerous to summon your car down the quarter mile. So, Super Tiger TV, have you ever watched Bullet? It's been a long time. I mean, I'm familiar with the chase scenes. I'm always rooting for the Charger, but you know what can I tell you? But yeah, very familiar with it. It's been a while, but I have seen it a couple times. Jim Adams, of making self-serve gas stations illegal has to do with handling hazardous materials. Why aren't we all in the other 48 states dead? Yeah, I think what happens more often than not is, and I'll be honest, I thought we'd see more harm from self-serve than we have. I was convinced we'd have all kinds of crazy stuff happening. And I've walked into a gas station or driven into a gas station before and seen someone pumping their gas, smoking a cigarette. I've seen it. I've seen that happening. Okay. But the systems are apparently set up now to where they're safe enough to where the average person can do it. And I was convinced that it was going to be difficult, but you know something? I mean, I know some people who are technologically declined who probably shouldn't be pumping their own gas, but for the most part, most people can figure it out. Hey, Fred Corrado, good show, Steve. Thank you. Well, hey, thank you for checking in for the time you spent here. I appreciate it. Super Tiger TV says Steve McQueen was great in Bullet. Wasn't Steve McQueen great in almost everything? Steve McQueen is one of those actors who pretty much did good work in everything he did. And most actors or actresses, you can point to one or two things they did and go like, what were they thinking with that? Are there any, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, are there any situations where Steve McQueen either was in a clunker or where he himself like phoned it in for the money? I can't think of any at the top of my head. So JP is off on the road now. Next up, Casper, Wyoming. Tell the friendly ghost we said hello for all of us. Thank you very much. And thank you for checking in. Bart Oman, have a great day until next time. And to you, my friend. Yeah, we are approaching the bottom of the hour. I always forget my iPad is still off. Oh. Chevy Mustang says, I believe they're withholding the bridge jumping video so as to avoid another Tide Pod event. I have not seen any video, and I actually waited a couple days before putting up my video because I wanted to see it like everyone else did. And as far as I know, they have not put up a video of the man jumping the bridge, Dukes of Hazzard style, down there in Detroit. So Lemsia says, hey, Steve McQueen said, I'm not sure if I'm an actor who races or a racer who acts. There you go. Amateur Shooters is the first Thomas Crown affair. I will admit that was a difficult movie to watch. It didn't, there was something very clunky about it. I've watched it and I remember going, this one is not that good, but Peter Mandix, thanks for the time today, Steve. Thank you. Amateur Shooter points out that Faye Dunaway was in both. I really liked the version with Pierce Brosnan in it. I know it's a little far-fetched, but I thought it was a decent movie. Referring to Thomas Crown Affair. JK Loa 1, thanks, Steve, from Great Videos from Finland. Owner of a 1963 Plymouth Valiant. Wow. Thanks for checking in. I appreciate that. I'm always fascinated by American cars that make it overseas. And when somebody over there appreciates an odd car like a Plymouth Valiant, curious to know which engine you've got in that. Wild Bill 57 says, hey, Steve, I was really glad to hear that you missed the week before because I had a family event that week and felt bad because I missed it also. MJC says Mackinac City charges more for full serve and they don't tell the customers until they start pumping. If that's true, I didn't notice, but I looked at the bill and it was pretty much the same thing I paid last time I filled up, so it couldn't have been that bad. So, Matthew Shostrom says, what about the $100 location? What, on today's set? It's in plain view. It's the plain view doctrine. Mark Heil, how can you not see the hundo? And once you see it, how can you unsee it? There are only two genders. It's too bad about White's Electronics, referring to the metal detector company. If only trademark laws were enforced. And well, it's trademarks and patents. A lot of their technology is patented. And so I suspect there's a whole lot of both going on. And the problem is that there's not enough money out there to make a lawsuit like that stick, especially, or worthwhile, especially suing somebody from China, which is where that was happening. So, and It's Not Me 07 says, okay, time for a top-down ride in my 2001 Sebring convertible built in Sterling Heights, Michigan. Song Yardbird, glad I got to tune in today. Thanks, Steve. And thank you all. Thank you all. We've been here for an hour and 40. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm out of Gatorade as well. So I will talk to you again next weekend. As always, same place, same station. Till then, you behave yourself. Bye-bye.